Yo, what up, and welcome everybody back to Pnoid News. Man, listen, all right. Apparently, Jimmy Dore has found another retarded economist who thinks that just giving away free money to everybody is a good idea. So I guess what we're gonna do is just go through and correct his nonsense because that's probably the best way to do what it is that we do. So let's get to it.
Excited. He is the co-founder of Real Progress in Action. That's a nonprofit economic education organization. He is the host of the Macro and Cheese podcast. He is the advocate and educator on modern monetary theory. We are pleased to have him with us. It's Steve Grumbine. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you so much for being here. Tell the audience what neoliberalism is and why neoliberalism is a failure. Could you do that?
Absolutely. Neoliberalism started in the 60s. Basically it was a mass push to get rid of the government sector, to get rid of the public space and make everything private. And they've been doing this nonstop since the 60s, 70s. Once Reagan got in office, it went in overdrive. Eliminating the concept of the public purpose, eliminating the concept of public money, eliminating the concept of the public good, and transferring it instead to the private sector, to the capitalists, to the speculators and investor class. And largely, it's all about taking public space and eliminating it and turning it into private profit.
Okay, so let's correct this. All right, here's the problem. When you talk about public sector entities, right? For instance, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the post office, any of these things, they're terrible at their jobs, right? And the reason why they're terrible at their jobs is because they can't get fired and they have pensions and they have government mandates to get things done. So therefore, they're protected when they do shitty things. And they stand here and they're extremely wasteful at what they do. And it's really important that everybody understands that. Because the public sector and the government in general should not be running much of anything inside of the country because they're trash at their jobs. In case we haven't noticed with the elections, with the COVID response, with the bailouts, with the wars, with anything that the government does, it tends to touch and destroy. That just tends to be how it works. Let's keep going.
So, yeah, exactly. Okay, and of course we know, and they try to inject a profit motive into everything, into our culture, into every part of our culture, including places like education and healthcare where they should not be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, how good are the public education sector really when it comes down to it? Let's be honest here, all right? Public schools are trash. All right, they have been for years and they always will be. Why is that? Because of the fact that you have a group of individuals standing here with no real way of, like, you don't have any way of keeping in check how much money that they spend, right? So these school boards, what they do is they stand here and they give out bond, or they take out bond loans for like school projects that they're going to do, new school buildings, things of this nature, paying salaries, whatever, and they just charge a taxpayer for it. And the taxpayer has no way of stopping them. And this is a bit of a problem because of the fact that they just continue to throw money at problems. And when they do, it just turns into a massive clusterfuck because nobody's really educating anybody. No one's getting an education. Like, you have places in this country where, it's like on average 17% of the adults in this country can't read. They're illiterate. So why is it that you would want to continue that system? The government is trash, and they stand here and they tell you a bunch of bullshit the whole time you're in school, and you have to unlearn all of that. You go to school for what? Kindergarten through 12th grade. That's 13 years. And you come out and you have to be trained how to flip a burger. You are literally not ready to do any job coming out of high school. So that means literally in our society, there's nothing that you're able to do. You can't garden. You can't run a forklift. You can't manage a checkbook. You can't manage inventory. You can't do anything that really matters when it comes down to it. And we're not just talking about like, oh, you can't do anything that matters profit wise. You can't do anything that matters life wise. Like you don't know how to feed yourself. You don't know how to take care of yourself. There's nothing in school that they teach you that is good for you as a human being. They just fill you with a bunch of ideologies and try to teach you how to interact with other people while you're inside of this fake hug box of a concrete place, right? That's what a school is. And legit, it's trash. Like the whole thing's trash. Like anybody who's like over the age of 30 understands that most of the people in high school and how you acted in high school would never be how you would act as an adult ever again. Right? And you wouldn't interact with those people if somebody paid you to. Usually you try to avoid not working with them on a regular basis. You try to get as far away from those individuals as possible because that's the way that public school operates. It just puts a whole bunch of human beings together that ought not to be dealing with each other. Let's keep rocking.
I remember Barack Obama's big idea with Arnie Duncan as his Secretary of Education. Arnie Duncan, by the way, you know how many days he spent in the classroom? 0. Arnie Duncan was the head of education, spent 0 days in the classroom, and his big idea was race to the top. Remember that? You had schools compete for education dollars, and the one that did the best on the test got the most money. Well, the ones who do the worst are the ones who need the more fucking money. They have it exactly backwards. That's called a race to the bottom. So that's what neoliberalism is in a nutshell. It's privatizing every piece of public space, every piece of public good, and there's no such thing as anything for the public. You have to have a profit motive, and if there's a profit motive, that means it's going to be somehow better and Christ-like. Jesus Christ likes a profit motive because socialism makes you lazy, and that's a sin, right?
That's just bunk, man. Absolutely. But that's what they're saying, right? That is the going story, right?
Yes, that's the whole what.
No, socialism does make you lazy and worthless. Like it is what it is. Like you can't just give away people. You can't give people free stuff and, expect them to be, productive. That's not how it operates. Like you let people sit around and sit on their ass all day long, they're going to sit around and sit on their ass all day long. That's just fact of life. Not everybody can be the clown. And that's the problem, is that like the individuals who go, we should all be clowns, are individuals who are already clowns, right? It's like it's Jimmy Dore, it's, George Clooney, it's all these people who are already clowns. And they go, well, you should have art in your life. And you go, yeah, I'm be real with you, man. Like, as a grown man who works for a living, I don't know any other grown men that are really concerned with art. They're concerned with feeding their families and making sure that their bills are paid. That's kind of what's the most important thing. But let's keep going.
Absolutely.
So if you see somebody shitting on a poor person on Twitter and you go to their bio on Twitter, it'll say Christian. Because they think if you government shouldn't help you, and if you're poor, it's because you're lazy. That's the narrative that the right wing neoliberal.
It's weird because Christians are the most charitable individuals in this country. But by all means, let's keep shitting on the church. Literally, the Republican Party has divorced the Christian church a long fucking time ago. All right, they're useful idiots to them. Because the Christians don't like 90% of what's going on inside of the society. Legit. We need to stop shitting on Christians because it's really not helpful. All it is a bunch of people who are angry at their fucking fathers. Let's keep going.
Liberals have strown for our strown. Is that a word? Strown. I said strown.
Yeah, you did.
That is that. I was going to say strewn, and then I'm like, what's the past tense? Is the past perfect? It's strown. I knew a guy named Ricky Strown. Anyway, so we've had economists like Stephanie Kelton on the show. Explain to someone who's never heard what modern monetary theory is before. Can you explain it so somebody can, who doesn't have much economic background, somebody like me, what it is and what it reveals about how our economy actually works?
So, bottom line is that back in 1972, Richard Nixon removed us from the Bretton Woods Accord. And, it's basically a world global gold standard that he removed us from. And at that point in time, the people that understood money had.
Okay, see, here's the thing, right? Like, I keep bringing up this Bretton Woods agreement with everybody, and nobody really has any idea what I'm talking about. The powers that be do, All right. And it's a very important document. It's a very, very important treaty. That's ties the entire world together. Y'all talking about the New World Order and all this type. This is where it begins. Legit. All right. So the reason why he took us off the Bretton Woods Agreement is because countries like France and West Germany and Italy and Switzerland tried to turn their dollars in for gold. And the United States didn't have the gold to cover it because we were spending our money against gold to pay for wars that we didn't have the fucking gold for, right? We agreed to maintain the dollar at, $35 an ounce, right? But the thing is that we had printed way more money than that. And when we did so, we ended up devaluing the currency against the gold. And when they tried to cash in their dollars, we said, oh no, right? And Nixon took us all for the fucking gold standard, saying, we're protecting us against the speculators, right? But that's not really what the deal was. It was these individuals knew, right, that they were going to get a hell of a deal if they cashed their dollars in at that point because, the dollars were worth way more than they were saying they were actually worth. Like, they were literally trading in inflated currency for actual value. And it was bullshit. But let's keep going.
We had years of knowing this before. This is how we won World War II. If you want to say we won World War II. This is how we were able to fire up all the factories, fire up all the war machine, fire up the national attention to making the war machine work. And we were able to keep the factories going at 100%. The federal government was spend to take care of getting, defeating Nazism, so to speak. And, that very nature was forgotten. We long since forgotten. It wasn't an accident. The Mount Pelerin Society and all the right wingers, the libertarian scourge of Milton Friedman and others, Chicago School, you name it, in a very, very coordinated attack, sought to eliminate this concept of public money.
Okay, so let's talk about that. All right, so in World War II, yes, Franklin Delano Roosevelt stood here and fired up the printing presses. But the thing is that they maintained that overseas the currency was still going to be worth what it was worth before he turned on the printing presses, right? And the United States, due to the fact that it was the only country able to produce the way it was, and on top of that, it was trading those dollars for gold, right? And trading those goods for gold. And all of those countries like Britain and France and, whoever were sending their gold to the United States. That's how we ended up becoming the leader of the world as far as things are really concerned. We did turn on the printing presses, but it was a massive amount of debt that we took on that we ended up paying off afterwards, with taxes being at 99% on the top 1%. That's something that individuals don't understand. And this is the problem, is that even according to Keynes, yes, you spend during a downturn, but you save during an upturn. That's the part that we're missing, is that we never save the fucking money. We just keep spending it. Let's keep going.
And what modern monetary theory does is helps us understand what has fundamentally changed in our finance system, not just our finance system, but really around the world. It's everywhere. It's not just the U.S. And you can tell that what had happened in 1972 in the U.S. was what happens with pretty much all fiat currencies that are no longer pegged to a commodity. All the textbooks, unfortunately, are written in gold standard lingo. It's all the neoclassical textbooks. So we've been operating as if money's some scarce resource that we can devalue, that we can do all these crazy things with, that were really gold standard operational ideas. You had a pie of gold, basically, and you printed so much money against that gold. And when you printed more money against that gold, well, naturally, your slices of the pie got smaller and smaller, and that was the quote-unquote devaluing of money. Well, since that's no longer the case, we no longer have a pie of gold. Now it's based on the real resources and productive capacity of whatever nation is running a free-floating fiat currency.
Well, actually, it's based off of debt, but we can stand here and pretend that what you're saying is true, because that's what they want you to fucking actually believe. That's usually the rhetoric that's used. It's based off of productive value and all this. No, it's based off of fucking debt. All right, really, that's what it is. Right, your dollar is as value as the T-bills that are sold at the Treasury to be able to back them up. That's really what the value is worth. It's all debt. Get nothing misunderstood about that. But let's keep going.
Like the United States, like Canada, like the UK, like Australia, and others.
just define so fiat currency. Define what that means.
It means it just by decree. It's the state's money. It's state money.
So it means, for instance, that the U.S. federal government can print money, but the state of California cannot.
That's exactly correct.
So the federal government when they can print their own money, that's called fiat currency, right?
Yes. I mean, well, all governments create their own currency. Now, whether or not it's backed to gold, it's still fiat. It's just back to a commodity. So really, at the end of the day, what modern monetary theory starts with is an understanding of what money is. And what money is basically a tax credit. It's a unit of measure like an inch or a pound, and we can never run out of it. That's the bottom line. The money is not the scarce thing. The thing that's scarce is the resources that it can acquire.
Okay. So let me put it this way. So when we go into an economic depression or a recession in a capitalist society, which is, by the way, baked into the economic model of capitalism, that every 4 to 7 years you're going to have a recession and you're going to inflict economic pain on who? Workers, not the investment class, but workers, right? So,
well, the reason for that is because of the fact that we continue to devalue the price of workers by importing immigrants. Like that's why you're able to continue to hurt workers every 4 to 7 years, right? Like, when the country takes a downturn, it hurts workers because, workers can't negotiate for wages to continue to move on the way it is. And here's the thing, yes, workers' wages should not continue to grow exponentially, right? That's an impossible system to continue, right? That's that idea of economic, infinite growth, right? You can't have infinite growth. That just doesn't work, right? Because you have finite resources. It just is what it is. So what you have to do is you have to stop standing here having, you have to be able to have the workers' rates get to a point where individuals are stable and everybody's able to feed themselves and do what you need to do. But you can't do that while you continue to bring new people into the country every fucking year, right? And that's the problem that you're running into. And everybody goes, oh, but we're going to stagnate and da-da-da-da, innovation and all these type of things. Well, what's more important, right? I mean, ultimately, all these things are about trying to make sure that individuals are better off as human beings and able to feed themselves. And it's all about the society as a whole. It's not about, just the technological growth, right? Because the technological growth and all these type of things only help you if everybody's able to participate inside of them. And that's the part that I think a lot of people forget. And that's where guys like me and TFM, we get in massive arguments about shit, because I'm not a huge fan of just continuing to allow growth forever, right? If nobody's able to participate in it and you're just going to have a race to the bottom and everybody's going to end up being Chinese. We're going to end up being a third world country in the end of the day. And you go, oh man, you as Americans, you're living in the top 1% of the world, sort of, right? The truth is that our dollar's been devalued so badly that, most Americans live worse than most individuals in the rest of the world. Because legit, you don't get to eat decent food. You don't get to stand here and actually, have time off to be able to deal with your family. All these things that we want, we don't have. Right. So that's something that, we have to have a conversation about. But let's keep banging.
What you're supposed to do in a recession is you print money, right? And then that gets us out of a recession, correct? Isn't that how you handle a recession?
It's interesting because what the government does is it doesn't print money like it used to. The old days, they just reel the printing presses out. Nowadays, what happens, the way it works is the federal government, when Congress authorizes a spending bill, it spends that money into existence. It doesn't print money at all. In fact, what happens is there's just enough money printed in the economy to handle ATM transactions and bank transactions. It really doesn't happen that way anymore. What the Federal Reserve does upon Congress's request is it keystrokes deposits up, and when it taxes those monies down, and it keystrokes those deposits down. So when taxes serve as a drain at the bottom of the economy, and spending is like a spigot pouring in. So there's always a flow, stocks and flows. And so in this particular case, the federal government should spend money on the things that it needs to keep the economy up. So what has happened, unfortunately, is our federal government has deficit spent on making rich people richer. It has made banks fatter and more wealthy. It's socialized their losses while making us suffer during these times. And so I think.
Okay, see, I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll say it again, right? All they're doing is bailing out the 401k and pension fund. Right? That's what they're doing. They're keeping liquid inside of the system so that they have the ability to continue, the banks and should have the ability to continue to gamble, right? And borrow money whenever the hell they want to at a very low interest rate and be able to have yield for 401ks and pension funds and things of this nature so that the system continues to operate the way they want it to. Because there's $70 trillion worth of 401ks just floating out there, and it's a giant Ponzi scheme that's going to pop. And that's why they're printing money to the fucking banks, right? It's so that the banks continue to have money to loan at very low interest rates to people who borrow for payrolls and, borrowing for inventory and borrowing to pay the electric bill and all these type of things, which are things that, the bank that, people do on a regular basis, which helps the economy continue to move. I personally think it's dumb. We should let the whole thing fucking collapse and go back to a solid currency. But, by all means, let's keep listening to this moron.
I think one of the big things within a recession is, where do you spend that money? Where are you going to get the most bang for the buck? And if you look at all the platform that folks like Bernie Sanders had put forward in the past, that is the kind of stuff where it's spending directly on the people, where the people get to touch that money first, and then it has a natural helium effect, and you tax that money out of existence at the top. And that is how the circuit completes itself.
So what people don't understand is when Congress passes a spending bill, let's say they just passed a $740 billion spending bill to go fund our military, right? Which is 10 times more than, which is more than the next 10 countries combined.
Yes.
So when they pass that bill to spend $740 billion on the military, they don't go and pass a tax to pay for that.
No.
That's the point. The point is that the spending that the government does has no relationship to the taxes it takes in, correct?
Zero. Absolutely correct. And I think the most frustrating thing about that is the concept of, you hear every one of them say taxpayer money, the taxpayer dollar. And what it is, it's designed to elevate. If you think about who the taxpayer is, it's typically a white fat dude with slimy hair and a jacket. You're not thinking of a poor black person. You're not thinking of an.
Well, that's the reason why you're not thinking those individuals is because of the fact that they don't pay taxes. All right. Like, if you make less than $50,000 a year, for the most part, you don't pay any fucking taxes in the country. I know everybody goes, oh, but I file mine, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you really don't pay any fucking taxes. Right? Real shit. Like, the vast majority of taxes are paid by individuals who make more than $100,000 a year. Just basic math. And just that's how the percentages work. You know what I mean? Because we have a progressive tax system in this country. So individuals who are poor don't have to pay any taxes, really, and they get more money back than they pay in. And they also get more services than they pay in for. That's how this operates, right? So now, with that being said, right, now, God, I hate to look at this. I really do. With that being said, you also have to have the conversation of the taxpayer dollars. Okay, so the spending on the military is funded by the taxpayers, right? The spending on Social Security is funded by the taxpayers. Spending on Medicare is funded by the taxpayers. All of these programs are funded by the taxpayers because the taxpayers eventually have to pay this fucking money back, right? Because it's all borrowed money. It's kind of the deal. So if you borrow money, we have to not just pay for that money, we got to pay for the interest on that money, right? And that's why we say the taxpayer dollar, right? I understand that, like, yo, they print money and, like, they just go, we don't really care, right? I get that, man. I do. I fully understand that. And when the Fed goes out and it's an open market program in the middle of nowhere, right, and it starts printing money up to be able to pay for things like the crisis that happened last year with the overnight markets, right? We don't have to pay that back. Why? Because like, those are all just treasury bills, right? That they ended up, buying themselves and then putting the money into the market to keep it liquid overseas, right? But the vast majority of that's because of Deutsche Bahn. But this is things that like nobody has any conversations about because nobody understands any of this shit. And this dude here, legit, he's just flat fucking lying when he really says things that he's saying.
Immigrant, all of which pay taxes, right?
Right.
So this is a game that has been played forever, and it was played to perfection with Thatcher and Reagan to talk about there is no such thing as public money. There's only taxpayer money. And this was a designed ploy. And look at how many progressives repeat Reaganisms. Think about that. How many progressives repeat Thatcherisms? Think about that. And then you think about how many of us fight about Medicare for all, fight about a Green New Deal, fight about ending student debt, fight about all these things.
Okay, so here's the problem that you run into with this mentality of Medicare for all and student debt and things of this nature. The reason why nobody wants these fucking programs is because of the fact that you're just going to have the government bid the prices up, right? It's the same thing with the colleges. Like, when you guaranteed all the college loans with the government, like, the cost of college went exponentially high. Why? Because like, there's no limit to what you can spend if, the government's backing that fucking loan, right? Like, the government doesn't know how to haggle. It's the same reason why like the government pays, for $60 a pill fucking Advils. Like, this is what the government does. The government is trash at its job. It doesn't know how to haggle. It doesn't know how to keep prices down. It doesn't know how to do any of these things. And the more money you spend, the more expensive it costs, right? And so you'll just end up having exponential spending every year to the point where the dollar's completely devalued and you end up in hyperinflation. And everybody knows that hyperinflation is a thing, but they go, oh, well, it hadn't happened yet. I'm like, yes, of course it hasn't happened yet. All right. We haven't printed that much money yet at the same time to be able to allow hyperinflation to kick in. And on top of that, we keep giving it to the top 1%. Bankers and things of this nature and corporations, so it never touches the people's hands. But the moment it touches the people's hands, it becomes a fucking issue because all of a sudden then that money just floating around the damn system and just burning the holes in everybody's pockets, and all of a sudden a loaf of bread's worth $1,000. That's how this operates. This is why MMT motherfuckers are retarded.
Green energy, a federal job guarantee, expanded Social Security. And why? Because we believe that dollars are scarce. We've been tricked into believing this thing about inflation and hyperinflation and all this nonsense, when in reality, the government does it already.
The more money, the less that your dollar's worth, right? The more you believe what this guy says, the less amount of money you're going to make every week. That's the truth, all right? The less an hour your labor's worth. Because if a dollar isn't valuable, if a dollar doesn't have some type of scarcity to it, all of a sudden your labor's worth nothing. And that's the problem. That's where it comes down to. Because then when you go to buy a car and it's $200,000, they go, oh, well, it's because the dollar's worthless. It's not because the car's worth more. It's the same thing today where, you have cars that, worth $50,000, $60,000, $100,000. Right, that used to be, $20,000 cars, right? Your dollar didn't gain value, you know what I mean? Like, the car hasn't gained any value. The car isn't any better than what it used to be. Still serves the same fucking purpose. It's that the dollar got devalued, right? While your paycheck has remained the same. That's the fucking problem when it comes down to it, because things cost more. When you have a devalued currency, things cost more money, right? So the overhead in the business is much higher. Their margins are much lower, right? So they have to raise prices. That's how that operates. That's simple. This dude's an asshole, and he legit doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Ready for our military, and it'll do a tax cut just because it's got the hubris. It'll do a tax cut when it goes ahead and raises the military up. Well, it simultaneously says, how are you going to pay for Medicare for all? How are you going to pay for it, Jimmy? How are you going to pay for
Well, you do understand that, $3 trillion versus, you know what I'm saying, like 700 billion are two different numbers, right? Like one's bigger, one's smaller. Like you're going to find $3 trillion to be able to pay for Medicare for all, right? Like if you pay $3 trillion for Medicare for all, like you do understand that like it's just going to completely destroy our economy as a whole. Like I understand we already give that money up. But the truth is that like, individuals actually make that first and then give it to fucking people and its real actual value. Whereas you're just going to spend the fucking money as a whole and give it out to government workers who are going to collect a pension and get government benefits. And you're going to end up just assing out the whole country. But I mean, by all means, let's listen to what the fuck you're saying because you're apparently smarter than I am.
For it. And this is the trick. And this is what we need every one of the listeners, every one of the people that are consider themselves to be progressive, leftists, even conscientious centrists, if such a thing could exist. If you guys are out there, remember this, fight for this. This is the most important thing.
So let me just, correct me if it's, let me make a statement and you tell me if it's right or wrong.
Sure.
So the government already practices modern monetary theory, correct?
Absolutely. It's a lens. It's happening right now.
It's happening right. So right now, what the government is doing, practicing your theory, meaning that the dollar is not tied to a commodity, meaning it's not tied to gold or anything. The dollar, we just print it when the government needs it or does it digitally, electronically, creates money for programs they want to spend it on. And they never think of how they're going to pay for it or how much money. So, in fact, right now, they're spending a lot of money, $5 trillion in the CARES Act, and no one asked how you're going to pay for that. But here's the difference. Here's the difference between how they're doing it today and how they did it in 1932 with FDR. And FDR, he had a jobs program. He put money into people's pockets. He's created Social Security. So it was called demand economy. Right now we have, from Reagan on, we have supply side economy, which is you give money to the people at the top. They'll spend so much fucking money, it's going to create people's jobs, and then that money will trickle down that way. That the data's in, that doesn't work. That's just an upward transfer of wealth. There is no such thing as trickle down economics. I mean, there is a thing. It doesn't work the way they say it does. So FDR put money.
Okay, well, here's the problem, right? And the problem is fundamental, right? Where you have, if you stand here and give people money, it's not going to go to like actual, like businesses inside of the United States. And the reason why it's not is because of the fact that the United States doesn't manufacture anything anymore, right? So when FDR did it and everybody bought goods, these companies in America had to expand and hire more people, right? Instead, when you give money to people now, they're going to go buy Hitachi TVs and Sony shit and whatever. It doesn't even matter. Like, you can go buy Echo and fucking Still and all these things. You can go buy tools. Like, all of them are made in fucking China, right? Like, so that's the problem that you're going to run into is just all the money's going to just run the fuck out of the country to another country. That's what people don't understand. That's what you're not getting here, right? Is that it doesn't work that way anymore because of the fact that we don't have manufacturing it. Right? So if we don't have manufacturing anymore, what are you're going to give the people money and then they're just going to go spend it and then they're going to be broke because the money's just going to go to China. It's not going to stay in the United States. That's the issue that you have. Let's keep
right into the working man's pocket. And today, when we have an emergency, a downturn in our economy, a depression, they took that money from the working man's pocket and they put it, and because nobody can go to work now, and so they're taking money out of your pocket. At the same time, they're taking what was Matt Stoller say? A money cannon, and they're blowing money at the richest people in the country. So they're doing it backwards from what FDR did. So and you see the result, right? 14 million people don't have health care. 19 million people on the brink of being evicted right now. Nobody's got any money, and they say they don't have any money to give a cash stimulus, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You want to go, if you want to look at how bad this is, go back to the savings and loan crisis in the 80s.
Right.
The same cast of characters have been milking the system exactly the way you described. The money cannon on the wealthy, on Wall Street, you name it. They have been doing it, and they've been repackaging the same exact people. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. Robert Rubens and the Hank Paulsons and all the other bad actors. These people have been recirculated, the Jamie Dimons, you name it. And they are still doing this stuff. They're doing it right now. The monies that have been spent into Wall Street to buoy up these banks have been used to literally fatten these people's wallets while people are starving, they're unemployed, they cannot get out, they're going nuts. And it's all because these rich, greedy bastards are literally willing to lie to you because you have been tricked and duped into believing that the federal government is like your household budget. And so we sit there and fight amongst each other about this nonsense while they're sitting there laughing all the way to the bank.
So this here, right here, proves that when they say we don't have money for Medicare, or we don't have money for your student loan debt, or we don't have money for a jobs program, or we don't have money for infrastructure, this proves that those are all lies. This right here proves that they're a lie, because they are willing to print $1 trillion a day. Just give it to the banks, $1 trillion a day, because they don't want their stock portfolio to.
No. No, it's not what that's about. All right. Like at all, in any way, shape, or form. That's about credit. All right. Allowing fucking banks to have liquidity so credit can move around the system. All right. Like, because what would happen is if they didn't stand here and pump that $1 trillion a day, which, by the way, holy fucking shit, there would be no credit in the system. And that's not just America. That's the whole world. That's to liquidate what's known as a check system, right? It's an international system that allows countries to be able to trade amongst themselves. But it's all done in dollars. That way, the United States, anytime that somebody stands here and tries to act like a shithead in the world, we can sit here and go, oh well, you want to act like an asshole? Well, guess what? You're cut off from the check system, and now you no longer have the ability to trade with any other country. That's what that's about. That doesn't have anything to do with government spending. Anyway, look, man, I'm gonna fucking shut this bitch down because it's been about 40 minutes. So, in the meantime, you'll know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. Do me a favor. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you hit that notification bell because, YouTube ain't handing out notifications to myself. You know how that works. Meantime, join the Discords in the description. You know the deal. I'm gonna holler at y'all people later.